but then not work too hard. Allow it to develop on its own. So we are moving Sunday night into the going to be the fourth week. The first week is Chesed, which for tonight I will call love and caring. Love and caring. And here's why. I've counseled many people who tell me they are in love, but it seems clear to me that they don't care for each other. I don't mean don't care for in the sense of not like, but in the sense of what it means to care for the soul of another human being, to take care of another person. And that's always seemed odd to me that a person would say, I love you to another person, but not take care of them, especially in language. In fact, sometimes when a couple says, well, things are going really wrong with us, what's wrong? And I say, I know you love each other. Do you care for each other, especially with words? And people say, well, we get so upset that the words slip out. And I say, well, then that's where you need to work because you may love, but care should be able to create something of a barrier against harsh language. And I think that's where most relationships fail. Why is it, for example, that parents always love their young children adore their parents, and at a certain age, depending on the family, sometimes estrangement can occur. And having asked enough people, it's always with what people say and how they treat each other, meaning the love is there, but it diminishes if care is not greater than the fact of love. So since I examine the emanations from a spiritual psychological perspective, meaning I'm interested in human transformation, I'd like you to think about this idea of love and care. Love, you might say, is something that creates a covenantal relationship. By that, I mean a relationship that you can't dispense with easily, that is supposed to endure over time. And then watch from what you know how these things deteriorate. Some are just not tenable, but some deteriorate because people are not caring enough. The second sphira, which goes by the name Gevura, in some system is called Din, D-I-N. And Din has many meanings in the Hebrew language, a range of meanings. One meaning is logic. They say lefi hadin, logically speaking. Sometimes Din means justice. Lifni mushurat hadin, within the line of justice. Din can have a sense of proper court procedure. So Din can also have a sense of a fair outcome of a legal trial. So when you think of Din, I like to think of it as something of a container for love. In thinking about Viktor Frankl's spiritual drives, he says conscience is one of the spiritual drives. I don't see it that way. I might just not be able to tune into Viktor Frankl, but I know that when people go into loving relationships, they have a strong drive to be treated fairly. Interestingly, not such a strong drive to treat other people fairly, but definitely to be treated fairly. And that's another reason why covenantal relationships seem to break down is someone says, I'm not being treated fairly. This is really wrong. And sometimes when one investigates, one sees that the other person feels the same thing. And there's just been a decline of fairness, which in some ways is a decline of caring. So I think in the drive to create loving covenantal relationships, which I think is a basic human spiritual drive, not a biological drive, but a spiritual drive, we also have a drive to be treated fairly. In fact, it's hard for me to imagine a person going into or existing in a covenantal relationship and saying, I don't need to be treated fairly. The third sphira, which mediates between Chesed and Din, is a double named sphira because different systems use the term Tiferet, which means beauty. Other systems use the term Emet, which means truth. And I've decided to use both of them together because truth and beauty have a very deep connection to each other. I'll just share with you when I was thinking about these things back when I was in graduate school and I was trying to imagine what it means to encounter truth. And the phrase I came up with, when you encounter truth, just like in this poem, truth is knocking at the door. It grabs you by the lapels, it grabs you by your shirt and shakes you and looks at you and says, you must regard me. You must take me into your life. Same thing with beauty. I remember when I first began going to museums in my 20s, and I would stand in front of a painting and I would just go past one, past the other, knowing that they certainly evince great skill of the painter. And then sometimes I would stand in front of one and be transfixed. It's as if the painting had reached out and rooted me in that space and in that moment. And I could feel I was no longer a willing person, meaning I had been, as it were, grasped by the beauty of the painting, which insisted that I stay and regard it. So the similarity between truth and beauty for me is in a sense that the metaphysical power of these words seem to channel through and insist themselves into our lives. I've especially been thinking about truth in the sense of inner truth. Now, inner truth does not mean, I think, even vaguely, the so-called my truth. The end of my truth is when people disagree about a situation, they say, well, you have your truth and I have my truth. I like to remind people, if one had a video camera, clearly only one story would be told about what people did or said. So there's no my truth of the experience. I'm sorry, there's not my truth of what happened. Things did happen. Now that when people say my truth, what they mean is my experience of what happened. And the fact that we experience things differently is so banal as not worthy of consideration. It's obvious that we experience things differently. So that has very little to do, in my mind, with the idea of inner life truth. Inner life truth is a very difficult thing to define, but I find that it is one of the constant themes in existential and humanistic psychology. I was reviewing Roberto Saggioli this week, and he talks about the discovery of the capital S self, going in, stripping away the layers that go over the self, and finding a crystalline point, a self, capital S self, your deepest identity, out of which all the other layers flow. And one thing that we know from spiritual psychological literature is we lose touch with that self. I'll say that self is held in the soul, and one has to journey carefully, as it were, into the realm of the soul to find that self. So here's another interesting thing. If you've ever gone in and found, and again, I'm not sure why I say crystalline essence, but I remember when I was in rabbinical school, I went on this search and I encountered a crystalline beauty, a diamond. And so I had the sense of the truth of myself, meaning my core self. It has a crystalline beauty to it. So try to imagine that every person, first of all, has a soul, and in that soul is the truth of their being. Now, I don't mean by that a singular truth that you discover. What I mean is a kind of way to live, of honesty with yourself, knowing who you are, understanding the human condition, knowing what's at stake as you go through things, when decisions have to be made and to make them clearly and courageously. So there are many things that happen in a life of truth. I think a life of truth therefore extends into authenticity, which I think is truth, as it were, apprehended by other people. When people say that's an authentic human being, I think that means they detect the truth operating in that person. So if you're interested in this idea, you can read books by Abraham Maslow and Eric Fromm, books by certainly Assagioli in the beginning, actually throughout the book. And they talk about the experience of the core self as opposed to the ego self, the core self as a kind of a revelation, a discovery of the organizing spirit of their being. It's a very profound mystical moment. And by the way, I'm the parenting the soul of the child class is on delay. I'm still pardon me, convalescing from my back surgery. We went to the surgeon. He said 3 more months convalescence, and I said, okay, I'll yes, sir. I'll rest for 3 more months. So that's gonna not be on for a while. But as I was thinking about it, I thought about one way to parent the soul of the child is at the age appropriate time for the child to reflect on that core self. With our children, it happened quite young. I mean, once Mirav and I knew that it was there, one thing Mirav and I shared was you read poetry from that core self. Certainly use your mind, but the good poetry is experienced in the core self, in the soul. And when they would ask about things, we would tell them, well, there's some deep part of you that apprehends the world. It's your truth. And in it, you see love, justice, truth, and beauty. And they very, very quickly were able to identify that part of themselves. That, again, we can call the soul, and then the core self, the true self, or the self experiencing the truth, is found deep in that realm. And beauty as well. I'm one of those who clearly knows that beauty is experienced subjectively because everything is experienced subjectively. People have subjective senses of what is beautiful. Somebody might call a piece of music beautiful, and I don't. But we share the word. So when if someone says to me, I find this piece of music beautiful, I might say, I don't, but I know what you mean because I find a different piece of music beautiful. Therefore, beauty does have a kind of a stable meaning. And again, the meaning is it presents itself to you, it asserts itself to you. It owns you actually for a moment, it possesses you. I think one can have mystical experiences in the face of beauty. Some people are the force of beauty channels through them. They create beauty in all the different ways that people create aesthetics and beauty in the world. So again, we experience beauty subjectively, but we all know what the word means. It is a part of human consciousness. So all these words, love and caring, uh, justice and fairness, the sense of truth, the sense of beauty, these are metaphysical words that cannot be fully defined. That's one reason when we studied Euthyphro last summer, where Socrates is challenging his interlocutor Euthyphro to tell him what he exactly means by piety. Euthyphro can't, because it never occurred to him that there are words, the meaning of which cannot be articulated because they are core words of human experience, meaning you can only define them by using other words, other core words. Whenever you get to something like justice, righteousness, you'll find that these words use similar words in their definition. That means you've gone down to a core word, a word that you can't look through it. If you take the word justice and people say, well, justice is just um, the greatest good for the greatest number. When I look at the word justice, I don't see that in there. That might explain what justice might mean. It doesn't define it. So when you look through the word justice, it is not a word that you can look through. It is not transparent. It might be translucent, meaning light comes from it. So when you come to these words that describe our core experience as human beings, for example, love, justice, truth, and beauty, you've gone to core words that form our consciousness, our experience as human beings. And for me and many others, they also have a metaphysical power, which means they somehow are a lens for the metaphysical dimensions of the universe. Uh, so sometimes when I sketch this, I see love, justice, truth, and beauty is in the higher self. They all coalesce into the good. The good coalesces into the holy, and the holy coalesces into the divine. And each of these are different stages into metaphysical reality. So with those two words, because the next word is netzach, which is identified with Moses as prophecy, the Hebrew word by itself means to be victorious over. But interestingly, a menatzeach is a conductor of an orchestra. So you might say the organization of beauty. So when I contemplated the word netzach, especially in the sense of a military victory, what came to me was the word will. Now, most of you know I have a very, very strong connection with Roberto Assagioli and his book, The Act of Will. He said he sees it as the organizing experience of human consciousness. And because we have caring, love and caring, Dean, justice, right thinking, truth and beauty, the fact that for me, will is next, that all of those therefore capture the will and insist to be acted upon. Even regard. So I think, for example, beauty insists on being memorized. Beauty, not that we do it, but we know we should. Beauty insists to be protected. When you think of our natural reserves, it says that people have discovered something beautiful and we don't want it spoiled. So we have to reserve it, preserve it, and care for it. So think of when I find something to be true, I feel, again, a need to make a case for it. Not that I always can, not that I always should, but at least the will is there. So try to imagine these deep experiences of love, justice, truth, and beauty appear in the will, and we have a will to care for them, to protect these ideas, to live by them, and to teach them to other people. Another way of saying it is these terms enter into the world of value. By the way, just look at the word value. If you have a value, it means you value it. You want to protect it. You want to teach it. You want to talk about it. You want to think about it. So the word netzach, next on our list, can have a sense of, for me, both will and value because they're very deeply connected words. So then whenever I do this kind of work, I want to see how it affects myself, my own thinking, what's going on. And of course, one of the first things I do is I run these ideas through our experiences in Israel, especially the divisiveness in society. And one thing I've come to realize as an outsider looking in, Israelis are pretty happy with being divisive. They organize themselves into a few basic tribes. You might call the left, the hard left, the right, the religious right, the ultra orthodox, and so forth. And they have their own their own newspapers, their own organizations. And again, from my sense of American democracy, I think uh, uh, fracturing into hard political groups is not good for democracy. They should have very porous edges. We ought to identify as people who seek truth and justice, not with this is my thinking. This is not anybody else should think it, but I should more identify myself as a person of truth, a person of justice, a person of reasoning, a person who cares for all my fellow citizens and all human beings. And sometimes one party gets that right better than another. And so I say to people, I don't belong to a party. I belong to the party of truth, truth, the truth and justice party, or the truth, justice, and caring party. And so when I talk to people here, when they ask me what my ideas are, I say it really depends on the case, and as opposed to reciting a party line. Because in reciting a party line, people have a sense of identity, people have a sense of allegiance. They don't feel they are permitted to say things that are not part of what their official tribe or group says. They don't want to be stranded. They don't want to be without a group. And therefore, they need to know what the group thinks and protect what the group thinks. This is natural. I'm not against it. It is very much a part of human nature that first people find a group and then they ask, what do I need to believe to stay inside this group? Then there are other people. We at Oratora many years ago, we called this the 13th tribe, is people that don't belong to one of the 12 tribes, and it's the people that want to learn what all the tribes are teaching and always be open to the teaching of the other 12 tribes. There's a certain kind of a person who does not want to have their identity determined by a group, their thinking, their moral thinking, their political thinking, but would rather think independently, to understand truth and politics and so forth from an independent perspective. That's who I am, and we've tried to keep that ethos here at our synagogue. When people talk about Jewish ethics, there really is no one political party or another that captures Jewish ethics, and there's no single answer to questions of ethics based on Jewish sources. Jewish sources can support a variety of answers. So with this idea of will, one thing I'm arguing for, therefore, is independent will, which means not willing yourself to think thoughts that the tribe thinks, but willing yourself to think thoughts that are independent, which means working through on your own. Just a couple of other ideas on the word will as it pertains to what we're doing here. Roberto Saggioli, in his book, The Act of Will, talks about, I'll say tonight just three of the aspects of will that he talks about. He says one is the strong will, the dynamo of the will. And he says most people think of will as the strong will. And most of you know that when he gets to the second will, the skillful will, that's actually where things become very interesting and very powerful. Because we all know that we might will a behavior. When I onboard a new person in wisdom work, then I say, as much as possible, no speaking in anger, no criticizing, no complaining. And they're very doubtful about this. And I say, well, what do you think? Do you think your relationship is made better by speaking in anger, by criticizing, complaining, using hurtful words, escalating conflict? They say, no. I said, so just stop. And then the fairness in relationships comes up, by the way, on cue. But what about them? I said, well, here's a truth. Don't worry about what other people do. Worry about what kind of person you want to become. That's a life truth that I live by. It doesn't matter what they do. It matters is the kind of person I want to become. And therefore, my will to live behind the wall of virtue is not weakened by a overwhelming drive for reciprocity. Certainly we all like reciprocity in relationships, but it's not the most powerful drive. The most powerful drive is to my connection with my deepest self. What kind of person do I want to become? Do I want my character to be related to the self found in the soul? So that's sometimes just a reframing. So the skillful will takes over where the strong will seems to extinguish in the face of complexity and overwhelming resistance. And in his chapters on the skillful will in the Act of Will, for me, it's an instruction manual on how to fight the Yetzer Hara, the destructive forces within us. And the idea that there are actually skillful psychological ways to work with destructive forces within us is a brand new idea to many people, and I hope to get back to teaching Assagioli's The Skillful Will soon. So on one hand, you have to first of all have the will, the strong will, to be a person of honor, a person of integrity, a person who lives by values, and then that is handed over to the skillful will, which can manage consciousness in such a way that becomes a force that you can actually work with in order to overcome the very, very powerful forces of the destructive forces within us. By the way, that's another mystery to people who, when they discover their inner life, and especially when they take on the wall of virtue, it happens with every single person who says, okay, for a month, I will not speak in anger. I will not criticize. I will not complain to others about themselves. I will not ask insincere why questions, speak passive aggressively, use hurtful language, engage in escalating conflict, or on the other side, engage in futile defensive behavior. It all makes sense. I want things to be better. I commit. I said, okay, I'll talk in a week. What happens within a week? The Yetzer Hara appeared. They say, I don't know. I dedicated myself to it. I really thought I could do it. Something happened to me. And that's when transformation takes place. Because when you look what happens to you, when you break out of the wall of virtue that's supposed to keep the negativity in, so positivity can go over the wall, but the negativity is trapped behind the wall. But the negativity breaks down the wall. That's the time to look squarely at the Yetzer Hara. This is another basic life truth. Every person has a Yetzer Hara. Every person has destructive will, destructive shape within you that sometimes gets activated when you try to transform yourself. So whatever it is, the thing that is you're trying to change, the destructive will won't let you. One thing I've done in my counseling practice is I do role play with people where I'm trying to teach a value such as speaking calmly when you are upset. And I say, I want you to imagine yourself being really, really upset, and then saying something like, okay, I'm sincerely, I'm really upset. I have something to say. I'm not quite ready to say it. I haven't put the language together. And can I get back to you? And people try to speak it, and they actually can't get the words out because they're not used to thinking in a certain way. It's as if the Yetzer Hara goes in and it somehow disconnects what I just taught them from the ability to say it. So there are many ego states of anger, appeasing, fear, etc., where that is the person's core troubled ego state. What I want to do is give that ego state a script so it does not think independently, a wisdom script. And then I have people actually recite the wisdom script. And that ego state does not want to recite that wisdom script. Because if it could recite the wisdom script, it means that wisdom won out over the power of the Yetzer Hara. How does the Yetzer Hara exert itself? Through language. It has its own script. So when you impose a script on the Yetzer Hara, it's really interesting. Some people actually get embarrassed. They say, I'm actually not able to repeat what you're saying to me with meaning. There's something is disrupting me. That's evidence that the habitual power of the Yetzer Hara is there. So this is where your will to transform yourself meets up with the will of the Yetzer Hara. And that's the last thing I want to mention tonight. The Yetzer Hara is involuntary. There's an organized intelligence of oppositional forces within us. You can't detect it until you begin the project of willing yourself against bad habits. Bad habits, the force behind the bad habits will will itself against you, and that's where the battle is raged. And of any book I've ever read, Assagioli's The Act of Will, his chapters on the skillful will are the most exquisite, yeah, I'll say beautiful, most beautiful and true exposition of what it means to fight the will of the Yetzer Hara. It's an ongoing fight, but it's worth it. It's way better being a person of honor and integrity than a person who gives into the forces of the Yetzer Hara. So this is my meditation this week on Netzach. For me, I use it to meditate on the idea of will. Next week is I'm sorry, we are finishing Tiferet Emet tonight, and next week is Netzach. So I'm giving you the transitional thoughts to get us from the third to the fourth week.